In the city of New Paradigm, everything had a number. The air had a number. The streets had a number. And every single person walking those streets had a number too. It floated just above their chest, invisible to the naked eye, but readable by every scanner, every camera, every device embedded in the walls around them. It was called the Emotion Index, and it measured everything you felt, every second of every day. Joy gave you points. Confidence gave you points. Ambition, passion, excitement, all of them pushed your number higher. And the higher your number, the better your life. Better housing, better food, better work, better everything. But our story begins with someone whose number was never high enough. Her name was Kale. She was 26 years old, and she lived in the lower district, where the buildings were gray and the lights flickered at night. Every morning she woke up and checked her index, and every morning it told her the same thing. Deficient. Not dangerous. Not broken. Just not enough. Just below the line that separated the ordinary from the accepted. She had tried everything. She smiled more. She laughed at jokes that were not funny. She stood straighter, walked faster, breathed deeper, all because someone once told her that even your breathing patterns affected the index. But no matter what she did, the number stayed low. Around her, the city moved like a machine. Citizens with high index scores walked in the bright upper levels, dressed in clean white clothes, surrounded by soft music and warm light. They never looked down. They never had to. Kale looked up every single day. That was her goal. Not happiness, not love, not connection. Just a higher number. Just enough points to move up one level. To be seen. To be accepted. To finally belong somewhere above the gray. She worked as a data sorter in a mid-level processing center, organizing emotional output files from citizens who had too many feelings to manage on their own. The irony was not lost on her. She spent her days handling other people's emotions while her own refused to cooperate. Her supervisor, a tall man with an index score blinking confidently above his collar, stopped by her desk one afternoon. "Your numbers are pulling the team average down," he said. Not unkindly, but not kindly either. Just as a fact. The way someone might mention the weather. Kale nodded. She said she would try harder. She always said she would try harder. On the walk home that evening, she passed a wall covered in city announcements. Bright colors. Smiling faces. Numbers climbing upward like rockets. Achieve more. Feel more. Be more. She stopped and looked at her own reflection in the dark glass of a scanner booth. Her number hovered at 31. The minimum for basic citizenship was 40. The upper district started at 80. 31. She pressed her hand flat against the cold glass and felt something she could not name. Something the index probably did not have a category for. She walked home in the gray light and told herself tomorrow would be different. It never was. Until the day she found the old man in the junkyard. She had not meant to go that far from the city center. It started as a shortcut, a narrow path between two old buildings that most people avoided because the scanners there were broken and nobody had bothered to fix them. No scanners meant no index readings. And for Kale, that meant a few minutes of not being measured, of just existing without a number attached to her chest. She had started taking this path more and more often, not for any particular reason she could explain, just to breathe. But one evening, she went further than usual, past the broken scanners, past the crumbling wall at the edge of the lower district, and into a part of the city that did not appear on any official map. It looked like the city had simply forgotten this place existed. Old machines rusted in tall piles. Broken screens lay stacked against each other like sleeping soldiers. The cables ran along the ground like dried-up rivers. And in the middle of it all, a small light glowed from inside a low building made of salvaged metal and old glass. She should have turned around. Every part of her training told her this place was outside the system, which meant it was unsafe, unmonitored, and therefore dangerous. She went inside anyway. The old man was sitting behind a table covered in ancient devices. Real devices, not digital, not connected. Mechanical things with dials and switches and actual physical parts you could touch with your hands. He looked up when she entered. He did not seem surprised.
"Sit down," he said.
"You look tired of being a number." She sat down.
His name was Soren.
He was old enough that his generation had lived through the early days of the index system, back when it was first introduced as a wellness tool. Back when it was supposed to help people, not rank them. He showed her things that evening that she had never seen before. Old journals written by hand. Printed photographs of faces showing feelings that had no category in the index system. Letters between people who had written not to report their emotions, but simply to share them. "Look at this," he said, holding up a photograph of a woman laughing. "What is her number, do you think?" Cale studied the face. The woman's eyes were wet. Her mouth was open wide. She looked almost chaotic. "I cannot tell," Cale said. "She could be happy, or she could be overwhelmed, or both at the same time." "Exactly," Soren said quietly. "The system cannot hold both at the same time. So it picks one and discards the other. And in doing that, it lies." That word landed hard.
Lies.
The system did not lie. The system was the truth. Everyone knew that. But sitting in that cluttered room surrounded by old human things, Cale felt something shift slightly inside her, like a door that had always been locked moving just a fraction of an inch. Soren warned her too.
He was careful about that.
"They know about this place," he said. "Not everything, but enough. If you keep coming here, your index will start to show irregularities. And when it does, they will come looking. So, I should not come back," she said. He shrugged. "That is your choice. But ask yourself something before you decide. Are you trying to raise your number because you want to, or because you are afraid of what happens if you do not?" She did not answer. She did not have an answer yet. On the walk back through the broken scanner path, she felt the familiar hum of the city reconnecting to her index. Felt the invisible weight settle back onto her chest like a hand pressing down. 31. But something was different now. The number felt less like a truth and more like a question. And questions, she was beginning to understand, were the most dangerous things in New Paradigm. She went back to Soren 3 more times. Each visit was longer than the last. Each conversation went deeper than the one before. And each time she walked home through the broken scanner path, the number on her chest felt a little less like herself and a little more like a cage someone else had built around her. On the 4th visit, Soren was not there. The small metal building was dark and the door was slightly open. She stepped inside and waited. Nothing. She looked around at the familiar piles of old journals and mechanical devices and printed photographs. And then she noticed something she had not seen before. A small box on the corner of the table. Plain and gray, with no markings. Inside was a single thin card with a handwritten note that said only this: "Find the 0. It is not the end. It is the beginning." She did not know what it meant. She put the card in her pocket and left. 3 days later, the 0 found her. It happened at work in the middle of the afternoon, during the most ordinary moment possible. She was sorting emotional output files at her desk when she overheard 2 colleagues talking in low voices nearby. They were discussing a citizen from the upper district who had been quietly removed from public records. Erased. Not arrested, not relocated. Simply gone. His index score had become, as they whispered it, unpredictable. Kale felt something move through her. Not fear exactly. Not anger exactly. Something wider than both. Something that had been pressing against the inside of her chest for a very long time. And then her index went to 0. Not low. Not deficient.
0.
The scanner above her desk let out a soft, confused tone. The small screen beside her workstation flickered. A colleague across the room looked up and then quickly looked away. Kale sat very still. She waited for the panic. She waited for the alarms. She waited for the terrible feeling of being erased, of becoming nothing, of disappearing the way that upper district citizen had disappeared. But what she felt instead was silence. A deep, clean, enormous silence that she had never experienced in her entire life. No measurement, no comparison, no deficiency score pressing down on her like a stone. Just her own breath going in and out in a quiet room. It lasted 47 seconds. She counted them without meaning to, out of habit, because counting was what you did in New Paradigm. Then the index flickered back. 31 again. Then 32. Then back to 31. But something had changed permanently. She had been to 0 and come back. And 0 had not been death. 0 had not been erasure. 0 had been the first true moment of her life, where she existed without being evaluated. She thought about Soren's card. Find the 0. It is not the end. It is the beginning. That evening she did not go home the usual way. She walked through the lower district slowly, looking at the people around her. Really looking the way she had looked at the photographs in Soren's collection. She saw a man sitting on a step with his head in his hands. His index was blinking at 62, comfortably above average, but his face told a completely different story. She saw a young girl laughing at something a pigeon was doing near a food stall. Her index barely registered the joy at all. The numbers were not lying exactly, but they were not telling the whole truth either. Kale stopped in the middle of the street and stood very still while people moved around her like water around a stone. She had spent 26 years trying to raise a number. 26 years measuring herself against a system that had decided what feelings were worth having and how much each one counted. And in 47 seconds of pure 0, she had felt more real than she had in all those years combined. She reached into her pocket and held the small card from Soren's box. She was done observing. She was done sorting other people's emotional output files while her own heart went unmeasured and unheard. She was done being deficient in a system that had decided the value of a human soul could be expressed as a 2-digit number. Something was waking up inside her. Something that had no category in the index. Something that the scanners could not read because it was not an emotion at all. It was a decision. The system noticed her before she was ready. She had expected more time.
A few days at least.
Maybe a week. Time to find Soren, time to make a plan, time to understand what she was actually going to do next. But the system was faster than she had calculated. 2 days after the 0 incident at her desk, she arrived at work to find her access card no longer opened the door. A calm, automated voice told her that her employment status was under review pending an index irregularity assessment. She was asked to report to the evaluation center on the following morning. She did not go home that night. Instead, she went straight to the junkyard, moving quickly through side streets and broken scanner paths, staying close to walls and away from the blue lights of active monitoring posts. The city looked different when you were moving through it afraid. The architecture that had always seemed neutral now felt deliberate. Every camera angle calculated. Every open street a trap. Soren was back. He was sitting exactly where she had first found him, as if he had never left, as if he had been waiting. "They found me," she said. He nodded slowly. "I know. I heard."
"Sit down."
She sat. Her hands were steady, but her index was jumping. 44, then 38, then 51, then back down. The first time in her life her number had gone above 40, and it was because she was terrified. She almost laughed at that. Soren poured 2 cups of something warm and set one in front of her without asking if she wanted it. "You have 2 choices now," he said simply. "You go to the evaluation center tomorrow, and you tell them it was a malfunction, a sensor error. You apologize and you cooperate, and they recalibrate you, and you go back." "Back to 31, she said. "Back to 31, he agreed. "And you live quietly and carefully for the rest of your life, and you never come here again." She wrapped both hands around the warm cup. "And the second choice." He looked at her steadily. "You already know the second choice. You have known it since the 0. She had known. She just had not said it out loud yet. Saying it out loud made it real, made it irreversible.
"The Central Tower," she said.
"The Central Tower," he repeated. The Central Tower was the beating heart of New Paradigm. It stood in the exact center of the Upper District, tall and white and perfectly smooth, with no visible windows and no public entrance. Every index signal in the city passed through it. Every emotional output reading from every scanner on every street was processed there, ranked there, stored there. It was the brain of the system. And if someone could reach the core transmission point at the very top, if someone whose own index had already gone to 0 could send a 0 signal outward across the entire network, every index in the city would collapse simultaneously. Not permanently. Probably not permanently, but long enough. Long enough for people to feel something without being told what it was worth.
"It is not safe," Soren said.
"Not even close to safe."
"I know."
"You might not make it out." She looked at the photographs pinned to the wall behind him. All those old faces full of unmeasured feeling.
"What happens to you if I do this?" she asked.
He smiled. Something quiet and tired and kind. "I have been waiting for someone to ask that question for a very long time."
"Do not worry about me."
"I am already outside the system. Have been for years." She drank the warm liquid slowly. Outside the dirty windows of the junkyard, she could hear the low hum of the city continuing without her. Measuring. Ranking. Sorting. She thought about the man on the step with his head in his hands and his index reading 62. She thought about the little girl laughing at the pigeon. She thought about 47 seconds of silence that had felt more like living than 26 years of trying. She set down the cup. "I am going," she said. Soren stood up slowly and went to a corner of the room where a large old cabinet stood. He opened it and took out a small device, no bigger than a coin, and held it out to her. "When you reach the top," he said, "place this against the central transmitter.
It will do the rest."
She took it. It was lighter than she expected something so important to be. "How do you even have this?" she asked. He smiled again. "I told you I have been outside the system for a long time." She put the device carefully in her pocket next to the card that said "Find the 0." At the door she stopped and looked back at him once. He was already sitting down again, hands folded, looking at nothing in particular with an expression she still could not name. She stepped out into the gray city night and pointed herself toward the white tower at its center. The decision was made. There was no number for what she felt now. There was no category, no index, no ranking. There was only forward. And forward was enough. The tower was easier to enter than she had expected. Not because security was weak. It was not. But because she had spent years sorting emotional output files, and in doing so she had learned something the system designers had never considered. The tower's entry protocols were built around index readings. High scores got clearance. Low scores got flagged. But a 0, a true 0, registered as a system error rather than a threat. The scanners simply did not know what to do with her. She walked through the first checkpoint, and the light above the gate flickered uncertainly, and then went green. She kept walking. The inside of the tower was nothing like the outside. Where the exterior was cold and white and smooth, The interior was warm and humming and filled with the quiet noise of 10,000 processes running simultaneously. Screens lined every wall showing index readings from across the city. Thousands of numbers rising and falling like breathing, like a living thing. She took the stairs. Elevators had more cameras. Floor by floor she climbed, staying close to the walls, moving during the brief intervals when the corridor cameras completed their rotation and began again. Soren had drawn her a rough map from memory. She did not know how he knew the layout of a building that was not supposed to exist on any public record.
She decided not to think about that right now.
On the 14th floor, a security officer stepped out of a side room directly in front of her. They looked at each other. Her index read 0. His scanner blinked in confusion. He reached for his communicator. She did not stop to think. She pushed past him and ran. The stairs became a blur. 15, 16, 17. Her breath came hard and fast, and her index spiked wildly, jumping between numbers that meant nothing to her anymore. She could hear footsteps below her, voices on radios, the distant sound of an alarm beginning to build like a wave approaching shore. 22, 23, 24. Her legs burned. Her lungs burned. The small device in her pocket felt suddenly very heavy. 27. The door at the top of the stairwell was locked with a physical key mechanism, old technology, backup system. She stared at it for one breathless second, and then remembered something Soren had said on her very first visit. The oldest locks, he had told her while showing her a collection of mechanical keys, were never really about keeping people out. They were about making people believe they could not get in.
She had laughed at that then. She did not laugh now.
She just looked at the lock and thought about 47 seconds of silence and 26 years of a number that told her she was not enough. She took a step back and hit the door with her shoulder once hard. It did not open. She hit it again. On the third try, the old hinges gave way with a sound like something exhaling, and she stumbled through into the open air of the tower's highest platform. The city spread out below her in every direction. Thousands of lights. Millions of windows. The full map of New Paradigm laid out like a circuit board, humming and blinking and measuring itself endlessly in the dark. In the center of the platform stood the central transmitter, a tall pillar of dark metal covered in slow-pulsing blue light, the physical heart of the index network. She could feel it from 10 feet away, a low vibration in her chest that felt almost like a heartbeat. She walked toward it. Behind her, the door burst open and 2 officers stepped onto the platform. She heard them shouting. She heard the alarm growing louder below. She heard the wind moving between the towers of the upper district, carrying all the small sounds of a city that did not know what was about to happen to it. She pressed the small coin-sized device flat against the surface of the transmitter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. The blue light of the transmitter went white. Then the white spread outward, racing through the signal network faster than she could follow, jumping from tower to tower and scanner to scanner across the entire city. Every index display in New Paradigm flickered simultaneously, then flickered again, then went dark. One by one, like stars going out, the numbers disappeared. The city did not go dark. The physical lights stayed on. The streets were still lit. The buildings still stood. The air still moved. But every floating index number, every blinking score above every citizen's chest, every ranking board on every public wall, all of it simply stopped. The silence that followed was enormous. She stood at the top of the tower and looked out over a city that was, for the first time in its existence, unranked, unmeasured, unknown. Below her, she could not see individual faces, but she could imagine them. The man on the step with his head in his hands, looking up and finding that his 62 is gone, and not knowing yet whether to feel relieved or lost. The little girl near the food stall, laughing at pigeons, her joy finally belonging entirely to herself with no device in the world able to assign it a value. The officers behind her had gone very quiet. She turned around. They were both staring at their own wrists where personal index monitors were now showing only blank screens. One of them looked up at her with an expression she recognized instantly because she had worn it herself for 26 years. Confusion. And underneath the confusion, something fragile and enormous. Something that had been living under the numbers all along, waiting. She did not run.
There was nowhere to run to, and she found she did not want to.
She sat down on the edge of the platform and looked out at the city and breathed. They let her sit for a while.
She did not know why.
Maybe they did not know what to do without the system telling them. Maybe they were feeling something that had no protocol attached to it. Eventually, one of them sat down a few feet away from her and also looked out at the city. "Is it permanent?" he asked. She shook her head. "Probably not. Systems get rebooted. Numbers come back. But not tonight. Tonight it is just people." He was quiet for a long moment. "Is that enough?" he asked. She thought about Soren, about the photographs on his wall, about 47 seconds of zero that had changed everything.
"It is a start," she said.
The alarm had stopped. The city below was very quiet. And in that quiet, something was moving. Not the system. Not the index. Something older and stranger and far less measurable. People were talking to each other. Not reporting. Not comparing scores. Just talking. She could not hear the words from up here, but she could see the shapes of it, small clusters of people on streets and in doorways, faces turned toward each other instead of toward the nearest scanner. The sky at the edge of the city was beginning to change color. Not the artificial light spectrum that the city usually projected, but something real. Something that had been there all along behind all the manufactured brightness.
Dawn.
Actual dawn. Pink and gray and slow and completely indifferent to anyone's index score. She watched it come. She thought about what came next. The system would reboot eventually. The numbers would return. The people who designed New Paradigm had not disappeared along with their creation. There would be consequences and complications and the long, difficult work of whatever came after a single night of zero. But that was tomorrow. Tonight the city was just people standing under a real sky feeling things that belonged entirely to themselves. She reached into her pocket and held the small card one more time. Find the zero.
It is not the end.
It is the beginning. She held it up to the light of the coming dawn and read it once more, and then let the wind take it from her fingers. It spun away over the edge of the tower and disappeared into the waking city below. She closed her eyes and felt the morning air on her face. No number, no ranking, no deficiency score pressing down on her chest. Just Kale, just alive, just here. And for the first time in 26 years, that was more than enough. This has been the zero signal. Kale's story is fiction. New Paradigm does not exist. There are no scanners measuring your emotions as you walk down the street, no index floating above your chest telling the world what you are worth. But perhaps some part of this story felt familiar anyway, because we live in a world that loves to measure things. Likes and followers and ratings and scores. Numbers that tell us how much we are seen, how much we are valued, how much we matter compared to the person beside us. And sometimes, in the middle of all that measuring, we forget something important. That the things which matter most about being human have never fit neatly into a number. The way grief and gratitude can exist in the same breath. The way a stranger's laugh can change the feeling of an entire afternoon. The way love refuses to stay inside any category anyone has ever tried to build for it. Kale found her zero and discovered it was not emptiness. It was space. Space to be something real instead of something ranked. Maybe that is worth thinking about. Not every system that controls us is made of metal and scanners. Some of them live in our own heads, built from years of comparison and measurement and the quiet belief that we are only as valuable as our highest score. Find your zero.
It is not the end.
It is where you actually begin.